So with this study, it was a school that was looking to change their recruiting materials for new students. And when you look at the sort of what they call like view books, colleges have these, high schools may have them, and they all kind of say the same sort of thing. And these guys really wanted to break out of that. Like, how do we stand out and differentiate ourselves? And they recognized that part of that process was they had to change the way they were doing their creative, or else they'd end up kind of having the same thing. You'd have a shot of students walking across campus with the fall foliage. You'd have students in a snowball fight, students in the student union eating hamburgers and doing homework. I mean, you can imagine that in any school, university, high school, boarding school, anything like that, it's going to be exactly the same kind of imagery. And they were like, we need to do something different. So to try and break out of that, they wanted to understand what are the emotions that really drive selection of a school. And in this case, it was a secondary school, so we're really looking at the parents, or the key audience, of where are they going to help their kids choose a school to go, like it was a boarding school. So the research was actually quite extensive. I mean, it spanned a couple years. We started in 2014, I think, and with some qualitative focus groups and interviews with parents, and from that we developed a framework of sort of essential landscape, the emotional landscape around parents choosing boarding schools for their high school kids. And then we quantified that in a subsequent online survey with prospective parents, or parents who are getting ready to send their kids to boarding school. They have like 6th or 7th graders and so on. And understood there were 4 key emotions. We studied about 8 different emotions, and there were 4 of them that were key drivers of preference for a school. And it came down to relief, anxiety, pride, and boredom. And it worked this way. Parents preferred schools where they felt a sense of relief that their children were going to be safe. They felt pride in the accomplishments that they felt their children would be able to achieve. They were assured that their kids would not be bored, so there was a negative association with boredom, and the anxiety would be essentially lessening anxiety. I mean, that's a big thing. You're sending your kid off, you're a 13-year-old, you're 14-year-old, you're sending them off to boarding school. And so that sort of alleviating the anxiety around that decision, and also making sure, am I choosing the right thing? This is going to cost me a lot of money. So the next step then was to understand what are the drivers of those emotions? What are the characteristics or features of a school that really trigger those kinds of emotions? So if we know if those are the emotions that lead or influence the decision in what school they're going to go to, what are the characteristics of the school that elicit those emotions or help alleviate anxiety or boost relief and so on? And then, and that gave the creative team now the characteristics they can enhance and represent in the school materials. Okay, let's not just have the kids walking across campus with the fall foliage, or the snowball fight, or the student union shot. What do those actually convey? Are those the right message? And how do we structure the right message? So that was the foundational research, and from that, the creative agency developed they went and did a ton of photography. They came up with some taglines and some things to say. And so the next phase of the research was, well, now let's understand the subtext. What's going on here? Are we choosing the right images? Are these images representing what we think they are? Are we saying the right things in the taglines? And are those conveying the right kind of message that we want? And then finally, how do those go together? And so you have these ideas where it became a way to investigate the subtext of the imagery and the message. There's an explicit meaning you get out of a message, we're the greatest school on the East Coast, or something like that. You can say these explicit things, but what else is that conveying? Is there kind of a subconscious message that's being relayed there? And you want to make sure that aligns with what your intended message is, and also aligns right with the imagery. So there's some examples where if you have if your subtext and your explicit text are not aligned, you can get a lot of confusion. You can have where maybe there's two conflicting messages being conveyed at the same time. Or maybe you've got a situation where you have a message that is inadvertently detracting from the main message you're trying to convey. And or there can be one that just conveys something really unintended and is just awful for your brand. So you want to make sure that the images that you're pairing with your message are lining up the right way. So so that's what we did with we measured the implicit associations with a couple dozen images, photographs of campus shots and students and things like that around that were taken actually on campus at our client's school, and we also measured the implicit associations with certain headlines, I guess you could say, just brief messages. And then we looked at the combination of those messages and the images, and to get a sense of what's the message being conveyed there. And so from that we were able to say, okay, here are 4 or 5 images that are best at conveying relief, at conveying, I need to back up. There was also, we had tied into the drivers of those emotions. So we knew those emotions we wanted to drive, but so really the subtext wasn't as much, do these images convey the emotion, but are they conveying the characteristics of the school that then trigger those motivational emotions that would drive people toward choosing this school instead of another, that differentiate us from all the other schools out there. So we had things like top tier, rigorous academics, a safe place, a sense of a destination, that this is a place to be, not just some school in the foothills or something like that. It was like a place to be, and it was an environment, it was a destination, place to go and be comfortable. So that one's a little trickier to convey, but in any case, we were able to then identify the images that carried those messages the strongest, and those became the foundation for their creative materials. The view books, the messages they would say in the recruiting materials and pamphlets that they would hand out at events, and that the recruitment teams and the admissions office would use. So that was really gratifying to see how that kind of came together.